I'm Laura from Small Dog Silver. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make two different styles of domed locket. It's a really lovely project and there's a lot of room for different styles and embellishment. I'm excited to show you how to do this, so let's get started. Okay, let's look at the samples that we're going to be making today. We've got two types of domed locket, one with a hinge and a clasp, and the other one with a rivet which allows it to slide open. And I'll be showing you how to cut the discs, dome them, add the hinge and the clasp for the hinged locket, and how to add the rivet for the swing locket. These are really nice projects to make because you can choose your design elements. So on this one I've used a little bit of gallery wire to form the pattern on the front. On this one I've actually used a piece of metal that I put through the rolling mill with a pattern sheet. But you can just use your imagination, you can add stones, you can add other embellishments. They're really, really lovely projects to make. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's take a look at the materials that we're going to need for this project. I've got some 0.9mm sterling silver sheet, some 0.4mm sterling silver sheet, some sterling silver tube, which is 1mm internal diameter and 1.6mm external diameter. And I've got some 0.8mm sterling silver wire, round wire. The tools that I'm going to be using include a disc cutter, which will help me to cut out nice circles, centre finders for the disc cutter, that helps me to cut out the retention ring for inside the locket. I'm also going to be using a brass-faced hammer for the disc cutter, and I'll be using a doming block and punches to get the doming effect on the locket. You'll also need your soldering setup and a jeweller's saw and files. I'm going to use the disc cutter to punch out a 1-inch circle from my sheet. If you don't have a disc cutter, you can obviously use your jeweller's saw and you just mark a circle onto your metal with a pair of dividers and then cut that out. A disc cutter just makes it a little bit quicker if you're making a lot of things that you need discs for. So to use the disc cutter, they come in a few different styles. This one, you unscrew the top button here, or the top dial here, and it actually opens the edge of the disc cutter. Some of these come with a fixed opening, but this one you can adjust depending on the size of the metal that you're using. So I will pop my metal in and then just close that down. Tighten that down. I'm going to use the corresponding punch, and you'll see that it's different on both ends. So this is the end that you're going to be hitting, and this is the end that's going to do the cutting. So this edge is sharp. You can also see that it's slightly angled. This means that it is easier to cut through because one edge will start slicing through the metal before the other edge. I'm going to use a little bit of my blade lubricant, so this is the blade butter from Pepe Tools, and that just helps the cutter to go through the metal a little bit easier. I'm going to pop that in, and then I'm going to give this a few hits with the brass-faced hammer. You can use a hammer, or if you've got a mallet you can use a mallet, and that should also work. And you'll see that that's gone through. So we can just lift that up, and there's our disc cut from the metal. So we're going to repeat that again so that we've got 2 sides for the locket, and then we'll continue and get those domed. So again, we've still got enough lubricant on here, so I don't need to add any more. We'll pop that in, make sure that this is tightened down, and then we'll just give this a few taps with the hammer to cut through the metal. You want to make sure that you've got your disc cutter on a really nice sturdy surface, because if it bounces, you're less likely to get a clean cut through the metal. So we'll just lift that off. And again, we've got a nice disc of metal cut. So we'll go ahead and get those domed. Before we dome the locket, you want to go ahead and put any patterns or texture onto there first. So I'm going to add a pattern to the front of my locket, and I'm going to use these metal stamps. So you can see I've got 3 different sizes of stars and a little moon. So I'm just going to do a little starry sky pattern onto one of my discs. You can do both sides, you can do the inside and the outside, you can do the back and the front, or you can just choose one to do, or you can leave them completely plain if you would like to. So we'll just go ahead and apply this pattern. I'm using a brass-faced hammer again. That helps to protect the stamps, and it also stops the possibility of any of the metal chipping off the top of the stamp. So I've got my disc on a steel block. I'm just going to stamp. You can get metal stamps by different suppliers from most of the main jewellery making websites. These particular stamps are made by an American artist called Pragmatic Artisan, and she actually hand cuts all of the stamps, which makes them really easy to stamp, which is ideal if you don't do a lot of stamping all the time. A different size star in here. I'm trying to stay away from the edge, because if you go too close to the edge when you're stamping, you can start to distort the circle. So you want to keep it as close to a circle as possible. So just stay in from the edge a little bit when you're stamping. So just go ahead and add a little crescent moon into the pattern. And there we've got the design for the front of the locket. Next thing that we're going to do is to dome the 2 halves of the locket. So for this, I'm going to use a sandbag underneath my doming block, and that will just deaden the sound a little, and it also helps to stop it from bouncing. So here is my metal doming block. You can use a wooden one as well, although the indentations tend to be a little shallower on the wooden ones. So this is all going to be very much dependent on how domed you want your locket to be. So I'm going to start with the patterned piece that I've just made. I'm going to put that pattern side down into the largest indentation of my doming block. I'm going to use a large doming punch, and again I'm going to use my brass-faced hammer, and I'm just going to start hitting into this, and that will start to dome that piece of metal. Okay, so we can see that that's starting to dome. So I'm going to go ahead and move to the next size of my block. When you're doming metal, it's always good to start with the widest side of your doming block, regardless of the size of your disc. You'll just get a smoother progression and you're less likely to get wrinkles or folds in the metal. You just keep flipping the doming block round and using smaller and smaller indentations, and they get more and more curved as you go. You can see that that's starting to take on a nice domed shape. I'm probably going to take it up a little bit more just so it's got even more of a dome to it. Okay, I think one more size up and that should be enough. And at this point I'm going to change and use a different size punch because you can see this isn't going to get down into that recess. So I'm just using a slightly smaller punch and that will help the metal to sink into that recess. I might have to just keep moving it around slightly. And there we go. So we've got a nice domed shape and you can see it's still retained the pattern that I put on there. If when you're doming your metal you find that it starts to not move too much, if it's become work hardened, you can anneal that with your soldering torch and then pickle it, rinse it and dry it, and then you can come back and start to dome it some more and you should find that it actually moves a lot easier. So I'll now go ahead and dome the back piece so it matches, and then we will be cutting out the retention discs which are going to be soldered to the inside of these domes, and that's what helps you to keep a little photograph inside your locket. Now that we've got the two halves of our locket domed, the next thing to do is to cut a retention circle which will be soldered to the inside. That's like, it's basically a little washer of metal that will go into there, and then you can tuck a photo into there so that it won't just fall out as soon as you open the locket. To do that, I'm going to find one of my disc cutting punches that matches the inside of the locket here. So obviously now we've domed that, that's made it smaller than when we started. So we'll just look and see for a punch that's about the right size. So just hold that to there. And it looks like that's going to be about right for the outside of the washer that we need. Then we need to work out how big a server circle we want to cut on the inside to make this washer. So I'm going to pick a punch that's a little bit smaller. We hold those together and you can see that you'll get at least a millimetre, probably a couple of millimetres all the way around. You can make a smaller centre circle if you want, or you can leave it so you've just got a tiny rim of metal just to hold in a picture. So to cut out a washer, I'm also going to be using my centering punches with the disc cutter, and this just helps you to make sure that you're getting an even circle all the way around. The first thing that I want to do is cut the centre of the washer, so the smaller section is going to be cut out. So again, we'll use the disc cutter, find the corresponding hole for the punch, just open that up. And I'm going to be using the thinner metal for this, so this is the 0.4mm sheet. I'm going to place that into the disc cutter and just close that down. Just make sure you leave enough space around it for cutting the edge out, the wider edge out. So I'll tighten that down, add a little bit of the blade butter to make sure that the punch is going to go through nicely. Just drop that in and then give that a few taps with the hammer. Okay. So you can see that's cut another little disc out, so you can keep that and use that for a different project. And then we know that we're going to be moving up to this size to cut the outer rim. So we'll open up the disc cutter, move that along to the one that we want to cut it in, and we'll use the corresponding centre finder. So this will just drop into this hole and it will actually line up and make sure that the central hole we've cut out is in the centre. So we'll just drop that in, give it a push and just sort of push your metal around a little and you'll feel it sort of lock into place, at which point you want to close the disc cutter up. You can take that centre finder out. Again, if you don't have a set of centre finders, you can do it by eye. This just makes it a lot easier to make sure it's properly lined up. Add a little bit of lubricant to the cutter, pop that in, and give that a few hits with a hammer. Move that out of the way. And you can see that that's cut a washer out of that 0.4mm metal. It has left it slightly domed, so we'll just go ahead and flatten that back out again on steel block with our hammer. So you can just give this a few gentle taps. You don't want to hit it too hard because you don't want to distort it. There we go. And then what we're going to do is solder that onto here. And that makes a little retention disc so that when you try and put a photo inside your Locket, you can just tuck the edges up underneath there and it'll stop it from coming out. So I'm going to cut another one of these for the other side of the Locket and then we'll go ahead and get those soldered.